Do you remember the great movie classic Journey to the Center of the Earth? Well, was it just an entertaining movie, or is there more behind the story? Well, apparently expeditions have taken place to the center of the Earth, and explorers have reported that the Earth is hollow. Join me and my guest, Dr. Frank Stranges, for an interesting Let's Talk Paranormal. Next. Welcome to this week's Let's Talk Paranormal. My guest today, Dr. Frank Stranges, holds degrees in theology, psychology, and criminology. He's the founder and president of the National Investigations Committee for UFOs and has investigated UFOs for more than 40 years. But today, Dr. Frank joins us in the studio to talk about the hollow Earth and a possible connection to UFOs. So, is the Earth hollow, fact or fiction? Hold that thought and don't answer that question just yet. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Frank.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
It's wonderful to see you. You know, I want to ask you the question, the hollow Earth, fact or fiction? Which do you think?
I believe from all the accumulated evidence from people who really can be called individuals in the know, the Earth is hollow.
It is hollow?
Yes.
So it's a fact?
Yes.
To you?
I believe it is.
So just tell me why you think it's not fiction. What supports it that it's not fiction?
It's not fiction because testimony has been given by military people as well as members of the scientific community. And also if you trace back in the biblical record, you find out that there are references to life in the heavens, life on earth, and life under the earth. We can't disqualify that.
Right. So there's life everywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay. How did you personally get interested with the whole hollow earth theory?
I've been interested in this theory since I was in Bible seminary many, many years ago. And when I would bring up these questions to my professors, they would tell me to shut up and mind your own business, Frank. And then I knew I was on the right track.
Right. Okay. So these poles, the North and the South poles that claim to be open, were they just stumbled upon? What happened?
I believe that the original creation caused them to be hollow. They caused the openings and at the North and the South Pole. And this has been verified down through the years. And so many world governments have denied that fact until just recently. And now in recent years, more and more astute scientists and qualified investigators are beginning to present facts, figures, names, dates, and places to prove that the Earth is hollow.
Right. And of course the explorer, Admiral Byrd, was the first person?
Admiral Richard Byrd ranked among the first ones to have a theory that the Earth was hollow. And one day he was flying his plane over the southern part of this planet, the Antarctic Circle, and his plane's engines cut out.
Right.
And he didn't know what to do because, you know, when the engine's cut out on the plane, it just drops like a rock unless it's made like a glider.
Right.
But he claimed in his hidden diaries, his secret diaries, that in the distance he saw several unidentified flying objects, disc-shaped objects that beamed his plane down to a safe landing. Where? On the inside of the South Pole.
Wow. Can you imagine how this sounds to our audience today listening to this, Dr. Frank? I mean, how can the Earth possibly be hollow? Can you imagine how it's sounding?
It sounds rather foolish until people start investigating on their own.
Right.
If they would go to the library and check out the many books that are written on the subject and then weigh the evidence. You see, according to the rules of evidence, there's sufficient evidence that would make a beautiful case in court that I would personally like to represent.
Really? You may get that chance yet. Who
yes.
knows? Well, let's take a look at Admiral Byrd. We've got a picture here coming up of Admiral Byrd. And I want to just read this to you, Dr. Frank, about Admiral Byrd and his diary. Because I did a little investigation myself and found this that you might be interested in. In his diary, he tells of entering the hollow interior of the Earth along with others and traveling 17 miles over mountains, lakes, rivers, green vegetation, and animal life. He tells of seeing tremendous animals resembling mammoths of antiquity moving through the brush. He eventually found cities and a thriving civilization. The external temperature was 74 degrees Fahrenheit. His aeroplane was greeted by flying machines of a type he had never seen before. They escorted him to a safe landing area where he was graciously greeted by emissaries from Agartha. After resting, he and his crew were taken to meet the king and queen of Agartha. They told him that he had been allowed to enter Agartha because of his high moral and ethical character. They went on to say that they worried about the safety of the planet due to the bombs and other testings done above the surface by governments. After the visit, Byrd and his crew were guided back to the surface of the planet. And in January of 1956, Admiral Byrd led an expedition to the South Pole. On that expedition, he and his crew penetrated down 2,300 miles into the center of the Earth. Admiral Byrd stated that the North and South Poles are only two of many openings in the center of the Earth, and he wrote about seeing a sun below. So there is a central sun.
Yes. In the very center of the Earth, there is a central sun that's covered over by a protective cloud. And a gentleman and his son accidentally were caught up in a storm and went into the center of the Earth, and they called this sun the Smoky God.
Very interesting. And we've got on screen here the hollow Earth showing Agartha.
Yes.
And the central sun there. Would you like to just talk us through this a little bit, Dr. Frank?
Yes. You notice the opening at the South and the North Pole? That's 1,400 miles across. Now, that's quite an area over nothingness.
Yeah.
And the Earth's crust is about 800 miles thick. And scientists are beginning to realize some of the facts are true that have been presented concerning the hollow Earth mystery.
Why aren't our governments coming forward with some of this information? What is it they don't want us to know about it?
One basic fear that they have is that people are going to learn that the inner Earth represents somewhat of a paradise. And as one politician stated, and I'm not going to mention his name, he said that if people believe and they start exploring and they find a virtual paradise on the inside of the planet, who's going to stay on the surface and pay taxes?
Well, that's true. That's a very good question, isn't it? Yeah, that's a very good question to pose there. Admiral Byrd was not the only explorer, was he?
No.
There were others. Who were the others?
Admiral Peary, who explored the North Pole, he also had quite a few experiences with the inner Earth theory. But Admiral Byrd, as well as Admiral Peary and many others, they were silenced by the government of the United States because Admiral Byrd was so elated at his experience that he was ready to make this tremendous proclamation for the entire world to enjoy. But he was silenced. And all of his material, his charts, his notes, even his private diary, they were confiscated by the government. But you see, he had one over on them because he had two sets of books.
I see. You never got to meet Admiral Byrd, did you, Dr. Frank?
No, I never have.
Right. But I think he still has a surviving relative in California named...
Oh, yes, Dr. Harley Bird.
That's it, Harley Bird.
He's the nephew.
Right. Did you ever meet Harley?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
And did he confirm this story?
Oh, he not only confirmed it, but he at one time was hoping to gather sufficient finances to conduct a further research into the subject by getting together enough people to make an expedition to the inner earth, but that never came to pass.
Never came about. Well, let's take a look at the next slide here and see what we have. This is planet Earth.
This is the Earth, the third planet from the Sun, as seen by our NASA astronauts and other cosmonauts from the Soviet Union, from Russia rather. This is what the Earth looks like from deep space.
Right. And of course we can see that little piece at the top there with the opening.
Yes, you can just barely make out that circle at the top.
Now some people may look at that, Dr. Frank, and suggest, well, that looks like a depletion in the ozone layer.
Oh yes, I've heard that said too, but what are you going to do with this particular evidence? Here we have on the screen NASA photographs taken from a United States weather satellite. It made one pass over the polar area, and this is what it looked like. And the next slide, after it took a second pass, reveals something unusual at the North Pole.
Wow.
Now there's an opening that cannot be denied by any clear-thinking person. And the next slide would give you further evidence of something unusual, and there it is. This particular photograph was taken as the United States weather satellite circled the globe from the south. This is the southern part of the planet Earth. Now there's a hole just as big as can be.
Wow. How big is that hole?
14 miles across.
14 miles across.
Yes, that's quite a hole.
That is quite a hole.
Quite an opening.
And these are actual NASA slides?
Oh yes, these are NASA slides that were recalled very shortly after the pictures were released.
And can I ask you where you actually got hold of these slides?
Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Then there'd be no more Let's Talk Paranormal. No. Can't do that. So it's a secret. Okay. Well, as you can see, those are fascinating slides. They really are. Dr. Raymond Bernard also tells stories in his book, The Hollow Earth, about people who have entered the inner earth and what had happened to them. It mentions a photograph published in 1960 in the Globe and Mail in Toronto, Canada, which shows a beautiful valley with lush hills. An aviator claimed that he had taken the picture while flying into the North Pole. Have you seen that photograph, Dr. Frank?
Oh yes, I've seen not only that photograph but others. And it's true, they have found a plush, beautiful area, and they met the most fascinating people of all sizes and all colors.
Really?
And they're friendly, all excepting for one particular group, if I may add.
Yes.
And that is those, if you remember, many, many eons ago, there was a war in the heavens. And 1/3 of the angels were cast out of the heavens. This is in the book of Revelation. And they were cast down into the earth. And they occupy one small section of the inner earth. And these are individuals who are called greys, who go around and kidnap and abduct people against their will. And I'm opposed to that.
Right. So that is a dwelling place for negative beings?
Right. And they have succeeded in building craft that look like saucers. Some look like beehives. The most destructive ones look like beehives. And if any one of our viewers ever sees anything like that, run for your life.
Really? Wow. That is incredible stuff. I also want to mention here, Dr. Frank, about other cultures who have written about the Hollow Earth theory. And that is the Nazi link. Let's see here. The belief in a hollow earth had some adherents in Nazi Germany. There is even a legend which says that Hitler and his chief of advisors escaped the last days of the Third Reich by going through the opening at the South Pole. Some of Hitler's top advisors, perhaps even Hitler himself, believed that the Earth was hollow, and there was at least one expedition by the Nazi military to exploit that belief for strategic advantage during the war.
Hitler himself never did venture into the inner earth. However, some of his hierarchy, some of his political hierarchy, they did see the inner earth, and they brought back a glowing report of the lush, green, plush areas that fascinated Hitler no end.
Wow. Okay. Apparently, Eskimo legends are rife with hints of ancestral origin, which developed from a paradise of the Earth's interior. Also, ancient writings of the Egyptians, Hindus, and the Chinese translate to a great land opening to the north. I have a couple of email questions here, Dr. Frank, that I want to ask you, if I may.
Before you do, you have done your homework.
Thank you very much. It's been hard work and I've enjoyed it.
I'm so glad. Yes.
So I hope we're spot on with this today,
you.
Dr. Frank. There's a viewer who wrote to us in Manhattan who knew you were coming onto the show today, and he asked this question: if a central sun does indeed exist in the center of the Earth, surely wouldn't we be able to see some kind of illumination being given when you look down over the opening?
Yes.
Now that's a valid point there, Dr. Frank.
Very simple answer. You've heard of the Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis, yes.
There it is.
Wow.
That's the evidence.
Now, Aurora Borealis, does that only appear at certain times of the year?
Not really.
No?
Not really, no. The Borealis is seen quite a few times during the course of a year.
But if we were to go and look directly over the opening,
Yes.
could we see anything? Could we see any illumination?
Definitely see the light. And many planes, jet planes especially, and propeller-driven planes, it's impossible to fly a plane directly over the North or the South Pole because your engines will cut out. This is why even our commercial flights and the military flights, they generally fly the perimeter of both the north and the southern openings of the planet Earth.
Right. And I imagine that some of the engines would freeze up, actually, because of the...
Not necessarily, not necessarily, because it's been discovered by Admiral Byrd and others that the more northern route that you follow, the weather begins to warm.
Really?
Warm up, and the waters begin to warm up, and you find fish and fauna and flora that are normally identified in the jungles of Africa and the Amazon. Now, what in the world are these doing at the North and the South Poles?
Yes. Wow. There's certainly a lot of questions to be asked and answered to all of this. This is just a phenomenal subject. We had another viewer from Tucson who knew you were coming onto the show, and she asks, what kind of a force would be accountable to hold the sun in its position in the center of the Earth? That is also a great question.
Very good question. The Earth is so constructed, just like other planets in our system, in such a way that the magnetic structure and the magnetic force and pull and influence run through the 800-mile thick portion of the planet Earth.
Okay. I want to ask a question about earthquakes. Do you think that there may be some connection if we have a central sun within our own planet because of the heat that's generated in there? Do you think that may have something to do why we have earthquakes here on the surface?
No, I don't believe that for a moment, because the central sun is covered with a protection that would avoid any catastrophe like that taking place.
Okay. I also just want to mention here also, Dr. Frank, there is a legend, it says here that there is a legend that Hitler and many of his Nazi minions escaped Germany in the closing days of World War II and fled to Antarctica, where at the South Pole they had discovered an entrance to the Earth's interior. According to the Hollow Earth Research Society in Ontario, Canada, they are still there. After the war, the organization claims the Allies discovered that more than 2,000 scientists from Germany and Italy had vanished, along with almost 1 million people, to the land beyond the South Pole.
This is fact. That's been an established fact. And it's no secret that Adolf Hitler, toward the end of the war, and this, of course, is already another show, toward the end of the war, his top scientists, they were successful in creating a flying saucer object that would defy anything that was in the air. And Hitler thought by producing these in quantity, he could turn the tide against the Allies. Well, these German scientists wised up toward the end of the war, and they knew they were fighting a losing battle, and they didn't like the way Hitler was handling things in the first place, and they took all the blueprints and the prototype, and they went first to the hollow earth area at the South Pole, and then they decided to land in the southern portions of South America.
Okay, now you have never made a trip to the hollow earth, Dr. Frank, and you do believe that it is actually a fact. What is it within yourself, apart from reading this information, that seems to ring true in your heart that the earth really is hollow?
Well, number one, I'm in communication with a person who is in the know. He has been there, he has spoken to the leaders of the inner regions, he has met the people, he's seen the vegetation, he's enjoyed the typology, and I have no reason to believe that this man would speak a lie.
And this man is?
Commander Valiant Thor.
Right. We did our show on Val Thor,
right.
Stranger at the Pentagon. Yeah. Right. So does he suggest other planets being hollow too?
Yes, he believes that every planet in our system and other systems are hollow.
Why? Why do you think our planets are built that way? Why are they made that way?
Well, one main reason is because of the unlivable situation of the surface. This is why they're on the interior.
Does that mean that if something disastrous was going to happen to our own Earth, that we could all flee into the center?
I don't believe that for a moment, no.
What is the civilization in the Earth, the population of the civilization inside the Earth? What is it, do you know?
No one knows exactly what the population number is.
Wow. And the moon. We have to talk briefly about the moon, because apparently the moon is hollow.
NASA, during our exploration of the moon, has located very strange things going on the surface of the moon, as well as in a number of the craters. And they have found artifacts in one crater called Clavius that stymied them. They couldn't quite understand how such a heavy-duty equipment, how in the world it ever got to the crater of the moon. And then some of the astronauts, including the late James Irwin, he was going to speak at our Space and Science Convention some years ago and tell what he saw on the moon and what NASA has refused to tell the American people that they found on the moon. And one day before the convention started, I get a telegram from him, and he very politely pulled out of the convention. I phoned him and he said, Dr. Frank, he said, I've got a pension coming and I'm not going to put my family in jeopardy simply by losing my pension.
Oh, goodness. So there's every reason to withhold information.
This is right.
Yeah. Before we close our show today, I'd just like to also read a little bit more to our audience of some of the other cultures and what they think about the hollow earth theory. The Buddhist theory, it is believed to be a race of supermen and superwomen who occasionally come to the surface to oversee the development of the human race. It is also believed that this subterranean world has millions of inhabitants and many cities, its capital being Shambhala. Ancient philosophy states that Agartha was first colonized thousands of years ago when a holy man led a tribe to the underground. The people have scientific knowledge and expertise far beyond that of the people who live on the surface of the planet. In India, the Ramayana, one of the most famous texts of India, tells the story of a great avatar, Rama. It describes Rama as an emissary from Agartha who arrived on an air vehicle. And that goes on and on and on, Dr. Frank. And it says that the entrances, talks about the entrances here. While the entrance to Bhagavati is somewhere in the Himalayas, believers assert that Patala can be entered through the well of Sheshna in Benares, India. And according to the herpetologist and author Sherman A. Minton, as stated in his book Venomous Reptiles, this entrance is very real, with 40 steps which descend into a circular depression to terminate at a closed stone door, which is covered in bas-relief cobras. Wow. In Tibet, there's a major mystical shrine also called Patala, which is said by the people there to sit atop an ancient cavern and tunnel system. And I could just go on and on and on reading this. It talks about the old ones, the beings that live there. This is just absolutely fascinating stuff. Before we close our show today, Dr. Frank, what would you like our audience to take away with them today about the hollow earth, for them to make up their own minds for this to be fact or fiction?
I would like to advise our audience that they should read everything they possibly can about the hollow earth theory. It's still a theory to many people.
Yes.
And then after they have accumulated facts, figures, names, dates, and places, weigh it carefully and use our human, sometimes spiritual intelligence, weigh everything again, and then make a decision.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Dr. Frank. And so there are many books that you can read if you'd like to know more information about the hollow earth, to find out for yourself if it really is fact or fiction. The Hollow Planets by Jan Lamprecht, Messages from the Hollow Earth by Diane Robbins, Telos, The Call Goes Out from the Hollow Earth and the Underground Cities. And also, if you thought that expeditions to the center of the earth was really just a thing of the past, there is a new expedition taking place in June of 2006. And you can join Steve Curry's expedition to the poles. I believe it's a 24-day trip. And it's going out there, they're taking a Russian icebreaker, and they're going to really try and enter the center of the earth, which will be really fascinating, don't you think, Dr. Frank?
I don't think they're going to make it.
You don't?
No, because no one could go into the hollow earth unless by the people's invitation only.
Really? Just like Admiral Byrd was escorted in? So
That's my opinion.
What will happen? Are they going to, will they close it off or something as he approaches?
Evidently, they could very easily do that.
Wow. Well, if you would like to join Steve Curry's expedition just to see if you do get there, then obviously if you make it back, call me and we'll have you on the show and we'll do Hollow Earth Part 2. You can also log on to see Steve Curry's expedition at www.voyagehollowearth.com. It has all of the information about his voyage there. And Dr. Frank's website, please take a look at Dr. Frank's website, which is www.nicufo.org. Did I say that correctly, Dr. Frank? So you can check out Dr. Frank's information and also more about Dr. Frank on my website, letstalkparanormal.com. And I have to say, as always, do keep an open heart and an open mind. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.